Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches. Today I'm going to be talking about the 1974 made-for-television science fiction, I guess, film, The Disappearance of Flight 412, or 412 if you prefer. And at Whitney Air Force Base, the US Air Force has been experiencing electrical difficulties aboard its aircraft. Base Commander Colonel Moore sends a four-man crew, led by a Captain Bishop, on a test flight, the titular Flight 412, to try and identify the source of the problem. Bishop and his men quickly have bigger things to worry about than electrical faults, however. They pick up three strange blips on the radar, prompting Moore to scramble two fighters to investigate. Those fighters promptly disappear, and the crew of Flight 412 find themselves ordered to divert to and land at a remote, abandoned military airfield somewhere in the desert in the American Southwest. There, the four men undergo an extensive day-long debriefing by members of a military special investigation division team, the main purpose of which seems to be to convince them that they did not see a UFO. Meanwhile, their aircraft is stored in a dilapidated hangar to hide it from search and rescue. To all appearances, Flight 412 has simply vanished into thin air, hence the name of the movie, obviously. Meanwhile, Colonel Moore, who has been left out of the loop on all of this, sat down to find out what happened to his crew and their aircraft. What did the men of Flight 412 actually see? Why is the Special Investigation Division so determined to deny the possibility of a UFO? Are these questions that the movies will bother to answer? Well, maybe, maybe not. Disappearance of Flight 412 is headlined by former Hollywood heavyweight Glenn Ford. Ford had enjoyed considerable critical and commercial success in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but by the time the early 70s rolled around, his star had rather faded and he was working principally on TV, though he would enjoy a late career renaissance of sorts with roles in the war epic Midway and the original Christopher Reeve Superman film later in this decade. The film also features David Soul, who in the following year would go on to be one half, the latter half, in fact, of TV cop duo Starsky and Hutch. So this is a movie with some decently successful actors, people who had, a command of their craft. So why then does watching it feel like you may have been the one who has been kidnapped by aliens and subjected to some kind of time distortion effect that makes its 70-minute runtime feel at least twice that long? Well, several reasons come to mind, most, though not quite all, to do with the script, which was a first-time effort from a pair of writers whose screenwriting sank almost without a trace after churning this one out. Though I am morbidly curious to see that they reunited more than 30 years later to write another television movie named Ghost Boat. Could it possibly be as bad as this film? It'd have to do a lot of work to do so. But it would hopefully at least avoid this film's first mistake, which is a half-hearted attempt to depict itself as a documentary. The film starts out with clips of UFOs and people reporting sightings in newsreel style with narrator voiceovers. And to be fair, going for a pseudo-documentary approach is not an immediately terrible idea when you're doing a secret government conspiracy type of film. Pitch it like it really happened and you can generate some sense of outrage over the treatment of the men in the story and or some creeping anxiety about the machinations of clandestine organisations. I mean, heck, it was the 1970s when there were still people actively looking for the Loch Ness Monster and a bunch of supposed Bigfoot sightings. You might even have found an audience willing to accept such a docudrama at face value, even when the subject matter is UFO-related conspiracy. The fly in the docudrama ointment, though, is that the script doesn't commit to it. Most of the movie plays out just like any other bit of celluloid fiction. Throwing in some somber voiceovers and the occasional time and date stamp doesn't make it any feel more authentic. Quite the opposite, in fact, since it draws attention to the parts that aren't done that way and highlights that they must be fake. Of course, the whole movie is fake. It's a movie, but don't draw attention to that while the film is on. It puts me in mind of some found footage films. In those movies, the thing that most often jars me out of the film experience is why are they not only still carrying around that camera, but actively filming with it, when they should have much bigger, more immediate pressing concerns? Those films that often profit from embracing their own conceit a bit more completely turn off the camera for a little bit, sell me on the idea that this is really real to the characters, but they don't, and they instead emphasise in the process that they are fictional. There's no way somebody would be recording right now. They have better things to be doing, and the same problem arises here, just in a slightly different form. All of the bits that try to make it feel like it's real actually make it all feel much less real because it's not consistent about it. And the half-hearted attempt to establish a documentary style also seems to contribute to the film's second big issue. Nothing much happens and it has no real conclusion. What did the crew of Flight 412 actually see? Why are the Special Investigation Division so desperate to discredit the idea of UFOs? These are questions you would expect to be at the heart of the film's narrative. Perhaps it was an alien craft, or perhaps an experimental Soviet aircraft. Are the Special Investigation Division patsies of the aliens, or loyal Earthlings who suspect one of the crew has been secretly replaced by an extraterrestrial agent? In a regular film, or a competent film, you can give whatever answer you like to these questions because it's fiction. When you start pretending a movie is a documentary, though, you're implying that what happens on screen really happened. And sure, this was the era in which Ivan Marx trotted out the legend of Bigfoot and made all sorts of preposterous claims, but this movie lacks Marx's shamelessness, or perhaps his lack of connection to reality. Its ending is basically all the incident, whatever it was hushed up, and those who continue to insist they saw something found their careers stalled as a result. Which is, I mean, it's weak, is what it is. You probably could manage to drum up at least some sense of outrage over it if you actually committed to the idea that there was something nefarious to cover up and situated those who opposed it as fighting for justice. But the film doesn't even do that. It never gives the Special Investigation Division a motivation, nor does it provide any consequences for the UFO sighting other than the disappearance of the two fighters. It's just depicting a bunch of events that happened without any real context or consequence or motivation or anything that would make it, again, feel like a fictional story, because in stories things happen for a reason. It's not like real life. Classic example, Chekhov's gun. If in the story the writer mentions that there's a gun on the mantelpiece early on and then he references it again, you can be sure somebody's going to shoot the gun. In the real life, there could be a gun on the mantelpiece for 50, 60 years before the person who owns it passes away, and then it's sold in an auction. But this is fiction. It's got to have an actual arc and a conclusion, and it doesn't. And perhaps the people making the movie knew the script wasn't up to much, because they certainly didn't spend big on the production for this. The sets and costumes are limited, and the use of stock footage, some of which is notably inconsistent in the aircraft it depicts, is extensive. While the leads are capable enough actors, the minor roles often feature bit players who stumble over their lines. There are occasions where the lighting of a scene varies sharply from shot to shot. Pretty clearly, every corner that could be cut was being slashed to the bone in order to churn out the film within the minimum possible time and budget. It's no surprise that after the first time it aired, this movie was relegated to late night reruns, where the primary motivation was likely just fill up screen time. And that was probably for the best. This movie would make a pretty good insomnia cure. Basically, don't board this flight unless you want to be bored. Next time, the 2008 historical action epic, The Battle of Red Cliff. I'll be talking about the cut-down 2.5-hour version, not the original 2-part 5-hour extravaganza that was initially released on Chinese cinemas. But that's next time. Until then, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if by some chance you've actually seen today's movie, let me know what you thought of it.